Welcome to this inaugural episode 0 of the ICU. This is not a podcast. This is a psychological reckoning. This is a spiritual CPR. It's a quiet alarm sounding from the soul of the collective, asking us all, do you still recognize yourself in the world we live in? Because most of us don't. So what the question I bring forth is this: what has gotten us to this point? Globally, it's a plethora of things. But in the US, in conjunction with things out of our control, the vast majority of Americans selected this. And in my informed opinion, not from a place of care for the collective, but from a misaligned position. Voting for Trump, whom I refer to as Uncle Donald, personally, my preference would be a senile Joe Biden over any version of Donald Trump. And don't even get me started on the choice between him, that's Uncle Donald, and superiorly more qualified presidential candidates, Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris. And this is not because I'm hinged to big D Democrats, but because their philosophies align more than not with my personal philosophy of people first, people second, people always, and not just in rhetoric, but in actual actionable policies. So are we pissed? Yes, absolutely. Because if you're not, at what our nation is reverting towards, then it's time for a critical examination of yourself. But we are in the ICU. Here we choose to leverage our inner authority to demonstrate our ability to speak truth to misguided power. We've all been programmed on how to vote, but with inner authority, we eliminate that misaligned single issue voter cop out. Why do I view this as a cop out? I view this as a cop out because nobody lives a single issue life, period. And instead of facing up to your bigotry, you term it single issue voter. Yet, while all of us sit in this space and we continue to advocate for everyone's free speech, yes, even MAGA's free speech, we will not let them off the hook. And we don't let them off the hook because we are bitter. Nah. But because the time it will take us to rectify the mess they've put us all in, that time could have been allocated and leveraged towards other more lofty goals of making our union a better union. They must own it. Let's leverage our personal internal controls for a higher standard of living. And that starts with personal accountability and responsibility. So, welcome to the space I call the ICU. Not the hospital kind, though it's crystal clear that we desperately need intensive care at this point in our nation's history. ICU stands for the intentionally competent you. And the reason why is because your inner consciousness has been unraveled. This ICU, this space, is a mirror, a sanctuary, a signal. Here in the ICU, we don't rant, we refrain. That's why I had to get that off from the top. Because here in the ICU, we don't rant, we reframe. And we begin with a session many didn't ask for, but desperately need. The therapist meets Uncle Donald. But hear me clearly though. This is not armchair diagnoses. This is not about naming syndromes or pathologizing a public figure from afar. I'm not here to offer soundbite psychiatry. I'm here to offer structured soul work. That soul work that comes from deep within. I'm your host, a reluctant but radically hopeful disaster and crisis intervention therapist for the national psyche. Today, I take on a role none of us asked for, but in my informed opinion, all of us will benefit from. That role, that of Uncle Donald's therapist, and on a grander scale, the therapist for our national and global psyche. But not in real time, but in real analysis. We're not here to diagnose from a distance. We're here to deconstruct the emotional architecture and psychic wounds that have shaped, fractured, harmed the American life, and they continue to do so. But here's the factual context we cannot afford to ignore. Donald J. Trump has taken the oath of office twice. First in 2017 and again in 2025. He is now, once more, the sitting president of the United States of America. This second return was framed as an overwhelming mandate, a reclamation, but beneath it lies a reenactment of the very dysfunction we never fully unpacked. Do you all remember this? Do you remember COVID? Do you remember the craziness and the mayhem? That incompetence on that biggest pulpit demonstrated to the rest of the world. It's that dysfunction that we have not fully unpacked yet. We all have lived in that dysfunction. But for some collective amnesia, we wanted more. We wanted more of it. The ICU series that I'm bringing to you is grounded in truth, reframed through therapeutic insight, and crafted to activate consciousness without resorting to outrage. Though we are indeed outraged, as you could tell, this is where we begin the signal campaign, not by screaming at the darkness, but by turning on that light. Turning on that light. In the ICU, I'll highlight my unique position as a combat medic, airborne, crisis therapist, and the staunchest people advocate you would ever meet, engaging in real analyses, not speculative labeling. I will maintain a reflective, no rant posture while deepening the integrity of my inner authority through personal internal controls for a higher living framework. Let's begin. Why this couch? This virtual couch? Why now? We start by grounding ourselves in this truth. Uncle Donald, also known as Donald J. Trump, did not arrive uninvited. If you've watched the movie Sinners, we see how vampires have to be invited to come in. Uncle Donald did not arrive uninvited. He did not take power as much as he would want to. He was granted power by the vast majority of Americans with applause, with ballots, with silence, and benefits of the doubt. Not once, twice. So the question that comes to my mind isn't and can never be, what's wrong with him? The question is more appropriate and urgently, what is inside us collectively that found comfort in him again? Here in the ICU, we don't chase clinical labels. We decode national patterns. We examine the unconscious loyalties that make us vote for personality over principle, even against our own self-interest. Uncle Donald is not a cause. He's a consequence. He's a consequence of our unmetabolized grief, unhealed nationalism, ethnic, or if you want to label it racial, nostalgia, economic disorientation, and you can continue to name this. He's not a diagnosis. He's a mirror. A mirror of what? He's a mirror into the psychological profile of our nation and by and large, our world. So let's take a step back into this while we're sitting on the couch. So picture the therapy room. All right? Uncle Donald walks in, boisterous, dismissive, allergic to criticism, craving affirmation. From a therapeutic lens, this suggests performance addiction. And performance addiction in this realm, we consider that a coping strategy developed by those whose internal lives feel chronically threatened. But this isn't about him. It's about what he activated in us. In some, he activated this tribal rage. In others, he activated this culture of fatigue. But in the vast majority of people, he has activated a hunting recognition, where people perceive themselves as, I've survived this personality before, in my home of origin, in my pulpit, in my party. This isn't an episode on his pathology. It's a collective reckoning with our tolerance for dysfunction masquerading as leadership. And all of us, no matter what role you play in society, have proliferated this. We sit and we assess. One of the biggest talking podiums is what? The media. The media didn't report him. The media created him. Because what they did, Donald J. Trump, Uncle Donald, wasn't just newsworthy. He was made for the camera. The media didn't just cover him. It built a shrine to his chaos. It used to be funny at first. But behind every clickbait headline was a psychic exchange. Entertain us, distract us, confirm our rage. We say we want peace, but the matrix reveal it. We are addicted to spectacle. This is not about Uncle Donald. It's never been. This is about our nervous systems, shaped by scarcity, primed for panic, craving control. So how do we fix this? How do we reframe this? We must shift from emotional entertainment to ethical engagement. We must leverage inner authority. And what I describe or what I define as inner authority is your ability to leverage those personal internal controls for a higher standard of living, where you build self-efficacy. Inner authority, that skill that got buried in the noise. Let's come back to center. Inner authority is the skill we were never taught, and the compass we now so desperately need. Because the vast majority of us have been trained to what? Follow charisma over consistency. Choose spectacle over substance. Confuse certainty with truth. But with inner authority, we learn to do things differently. Because inner authority is none of those. Inner authority isn't loud. Inner authority is loyal. Inner authority doesn't perform. Inner authority perceives. It's the voice inside that says to you, this feels off. And that voice that tells you this feels off, even if everyone else is cheering, that's your inner authority. That voice inside of you that says, this leader is passionate, but I feel manipulated. That voice that says to you, their tone says truth, but their policies say power. Inner authority is spiritual discernment in an age of deception. So what usually comes to my mind every time I sit and I listen or I watch snippets of Uncle Donald? There's several therapeutic questions that come to my mind, but I will posit some of these here for the collective psyche. So let's pause for some real introspection. What part of me felt safer under emotional chaos than under nuance? Ask yourself that. Have I confused emotional familiarity with moral leadership? Where do I silence my conscience to stay in my social tribe? Have I mistaken loyalty to a personality for loyalty to truth? These are not questions of blame. These are portals of freedom. And once we start leveraging these portals of freedom, where we have an inner authority activation practice here in the ICU that will prescribe to you. And this week's soul assignment is this. And this is to you all, those who crave authoritarian figures like this. Name the lie you swallowed to survive. Was it, they're all corrupt anyway? Or, at least he says it like it is. Can you trace that political trigger? And when the news enrages you, Do you ask, is this activating fear, ego, or inner child wounds? Can you now begin to replace reactivity with reflection? Before you take your phone and post, do you breathe or react? And say to yourself, I'm not here to be entertained. I'm here to see clearly. In the ICU, we recommend and we prescribe blessing the compass. There's a breath mantra that we put forth. Spirit of truth, lead my nervous system out of deception. In the ICU, we don't end in judgment. We end in uncovering. Uncle Donald is not a villain to be vanquished. Uncle Donald is a signal. Just like the overarching arch of our episode, of our station. The signal campaign on the episode universe. Uncle Donald is a signal. One we must decode, not deny. This isn't about left versus right. It's about awake versus asleep. And when I say awake, I don't refer to the woke term that they use now to be derogatory or disparaging. And the awakening starts not in Washington, D.C., but in your nervous system. Thank you for joining me during this episode. Next week, we'll launch episode 1. That's the inauguration syndrome, when fragile ego meets absolute power. Until then, remember to always carry what serves you, release what doesn't, and keep walking forward with your ancestors at your back and your inner compass ahead of you as your guide. Until then, may you diagnose wisely, resist kindly, and reimagine boldly. And please, don't forget, subscribe, share, engage, and breathe. And as always, send love to your nervous system. I see you.